Some things are simply hard to explain, like why this tiger keeps bowing every time he sees this little girl. Then they uncover the heartbreaking reason. Mandy couldn't wait to get to the tiger enclosure. She couldn't say many words yet, but she clutched her tiger plush toy in one arm and was tugging her parents forward by their hands. Andrea and Connor, her parents, couldn't help but smile. She only spoke a few words, but tiger was definitely one of them. Even though she was still very young, she remembered exactly where to go to find the tiger exhibit. They tried getting her to sit in her stroller, but she kept saying no and insisted they follow her. She needed to see her favorite animals as soon as possible. Mandy had slept well the night before, and now she was bursting with excitement and energy. As fast as her tiny legs could take her, she ran straight to the tiger enclosure. But what happened there would take everyone by surprise. The zoo had always been one of the family's favorite places to take Mandy, especially since she loved animals so much. This time, they quickly noticed there was a new tiger resting at the back of the enclosure. The enclosure was separated from the visitors by a tall safety glass wall, which gave people a clear view of the animals while keeping everyone safe. Knowing Mandy couldn't accidentally end up inside the enclosure, her parents relaxed and sat on the nearby bench, watching her enjoy the animals. Mandy ran from one end of the glass to the other, happily waving and saying, "Hello, hello," to all the tigers. She was thrilled to see them. She also spotted a new Bengal tiger lounging on a rock at the far end. The enclosure was huge and extended far back, giving the animals space to move away from the crowds whenever they wanted. A nearby sign said the Bengal tiger's name was Koshi. At first, Koshi remained in the back, but then he seemed to notice Mandy. Slowly, Koshi made his way toward the front of the enclosure until he was standing right against the glass. He stared at Mandy, eyes fixed on her. Mandy continued running back and forth, but when she saw the tiger watching her, she stopped right in front of him. There were plenty of other kids trying to get the tiger's attention, but he only had eyes for Mandy. She stood still, face to face with Koshi, pressed close to the glass. It might have been the only moment all day that she actually stood still. Then suddenly, Koshi raised his front paws and leapt against the glass. All the other kids jumped back, startled, putting space between themselves and the enclosure. Even the parents flinched, even though they knew the glass was strong enough to keep them safe. All of the kids jumped back, except for Mandy. Instead of jumping back, the small girl stepped forward and gently placed her hands on the glass where Koshi's paws rested. As soon as she did, the tiger lowered his head and bowed to her. It was an unforgettable moment. For Andrea and Connor, it felt like the whole world around them had suddenly gone silent. But the stillness didn't last. Other kids quickly tried to get the tiger's attention, hoping he'd do the same for them. But he wouldn't. He didn't even glance at them. Mandy took off running again, and surprisingly, the tiger followed her along the glass. It was a strange and almost alarming sight. Seeing a tiger seemingly stalking your child didn't feel like the safest situation. But when Andrea looked closely at Koshi, she didn't see a threat. What she saw was a tiger that looked sad. And when he paced the glass in sync with Mandy, that sadness seemed to lift, even if just a little. It was as if Koshi was copying everything Mandy did, step for step. It was remarkable. Mandy was still too little to understand how unique this connection was, but her parents could feel it. The tiger had eyes only for her. Mandy kept walking in front of other children, not to be rude, but just because they were in her way while she played. Andrea and Connor did their best to keep her from bothering anyone, but the tiger area was starting to get crowded. With Koshi and Mandy so focused on each other, it became harder to make her think about the other people there. Andrea and Connor started to worry that the other families might get annoyed with their little girl. Most visitors seemed fascinated by the rare interaction, but her parents noticed what felt like disapproving looks. There was even a zoo staff member watching them closely, which made them nervous. They decided it was probably time for Mandy to say goodbye to her favorite animal, at least for now. Just as a staff member began walking toward them, they turned and left, not realizing they were still being observed. There was plenty more of the zoo left to explore. It was a wonderful place, with spacious animal enclosures and lots of enrichment programs to keep the animals active and healthy. The zoo also gave visitors the chance to safely interact with many of the animals. Education and conservation were at the heart of the experience, giving children unforgettable opportunities to connect with animals. The rest of the day turned out amazing. Mandy got to feed some ostriches and hand a tall leaf to the giraffes. They watched the zookeepers feed the lions from afar and even spotted someone cleaning the shark tank. Mandy got to do all sorts of activities because she always volunteered with her little babble whenever they asked for someone to participate. She wasn't scared of anything, while many of the older kids had already learned to be nervous around things they didn't understand yet. Of course, it helped that Mandy had always been a natural with animals. They didn't even need to be at the zoo for animals to be drawn to her. She constantly had animals gathering around her, which never failed to surprise and delight her parents. Whenever they visited friends or relatives who had pets, people would often say things like, "Our dog's friendly, but he doesn't like kids." But by the end of the evening, their dog or cat would be curled up next to Mandy while she napped. Her parents were always cautious, keeping an eye out just in case an animal ever acted out, but Mandy had a real gift for making animal friends. On a tropical beach vacation, wild birds would land on her shoulder while she played in the sand. And when they went on a boat trip during that same trip, dolphins swam right up near her. To Mandy, it was totally normal that animals adored her. She loved them with her whole heart and never felt any fear. It was like the animals could sense her special energy. So being at the zoo, surrounded by animals, was just another exciting day for her. They had already met a few of the smaller ambassador animals and visited the zoo nursery to see the baby gorillas, which was incredibly sweet. But no matter how many animals she got to meet, Mandy kept asking to return to the tiger area. More specifically, she kept asking for Koshi. Her parents joked that maybe it was a mistake teaching her the tiger's name, because now she wouldn't stop talking about him. Mandy was more than happy to spend the whole day at the zoo. They even stayed to have lunch there. So when they finally gave in and circled back to the tiger enclosure, it was much quieter than it had been earlier. Connor was starting to feel a bit paranoid. He had noticed the same zoo staff member appearing around them throughout the day. Did the man think they were planning something strange, like trying to sneak into an enclosure or let Mandy hurt one of the animals? That would never happen. Even if Mandy hadn't been so gentle, her parents were always careful. It just felt odd seeing that same staff member pop up everywhere. But Connor didn't want to say anything and spoil the fun for the rest of the family. When they got back to the tiger area, it was nearly empty. The last family there left shortly after they arrived. Koshi was on his usual rock at the far end of the enclosure. His head drooped over the edge, and there was a heavy, defeated air about him. It was strange to see such a big, powerful animal looking so worn down. But somehow he did. Then Mandy called out his name. "Koshi! Koshi! Come here! Come, Koshi!" She hadn't even learned her grandparents' names yet, but somehow she had picked up the tiger's name almost instantly. When Koshi heard her voice, his head shot up and he turned toward the glass. The moment he saw she had returned, he started running toward her. It was a frightening sight. The huge tiger charged toward the glass wall, his massive body and weight nearly making the ground tremble. For anyone standing on the other side of the glass, it could have been terrifying. It almost felt like he would run straight through it. But instead, he skidded to a sudden stop right in front of the glass. He looked down at the little girl and then dropped to the ground. As soon as he sat, he pressed his paws against the glass and lowered his head, bowing to her, just like he had before. It was the strangest thing. He kept bowing to Mandy, yet he hadn't done it for anyone else, at least not that they had seen. The tiger's unusual behavior left her parents confused. Why did he keep bowing to their daughter? Now that Mandy wasn't getting in anyone's way, her parents sat down and simply let her enjoy the moment. That's when the staff member who had been following them around all day suddenly returned to the area. Connor stiffened, worried the man might interrupt and spoil Mandy's happiness. But that wasn't his intention at all. Instead, he wanted to explain why he believed the tiger was behaving so strangely. Every time he had tried to approach the family earlier, something had gotten in the way. Now he finally had the chance to explain why Koshi kept bowing to the little girl. The family was about to learn the sad reason. The staff member introduced himself as Sam, the head zookeeper. He worked closely with the tigers, and for months the team had been deeply concerned about Koshi. The tiger had been rescued and brought to the zoo a few months earlier. He was young enough to eventually find his place among the other tigers. Koshi wasn't aggressive, and at first he seemed to adjust quickly. The initial challenge of introducing him to the other tigers was handled without much trouble. But that didn't mean everything was fine. Koshi was severely depressed. He didn't play with the other tigers and spent most of his time lying alone in the farthest corner of the enclosure. He showed no interest in interaction or enrichment activities. He barely ate, and when he did, it was only enough to survive. That explained why he looked much thinner than a tiger his size should. The staff knew adjusting to zoo life would be difficult, but it was going far worse than they had expected. The heartbreaking part was that Koshi had been rescued from being kept as someone's pet. Police had raided the property of a man arrested for multiple crimes, including supporting a group involved in poaching and animal trapping. The illegal exotic animal trade had made him a lot of money. The man was tied to many other crimes and would be spending a long time in jail. Among all the illegal items found on his property, officers also discovered a young tiger, Koshi. He had been taken from the wild, and the man decided to keep him as a pet. The cub was first kept in a small enclosure, which he quickly outgrew. Eventually, the man chained him up in the back and allowed his friends to come look at the tiger, afraid the animal might hurt them. He had him declawed. How terrible is that for such a majestic creature? Not only was it extremely painful for Koshi, but it also had a huge impact on his behavior. As Koshi grew bigger, even his awful owner began to fear him. Despite being declawed, the tiger still had his teeth, and he could still do damage. They started feeding him less and left him alone most of the time. It was a terrible situation, but through it all, there was one person on the compound who tried to care for him, the housekeeper's daughter. She and her mother weren't treated much better than the animals, but the man ignored the little girl. That gave her the freedom to quietly look after Koshi. She made sure he had clean water and something to eat. She even pressed her head against his sometimes, trying to comfort him. That was probably what Koshi was trying to do with Mandy, show the same quiet affection. Eventually, the police arrived and rescued the tiger. They offered to let the little girl visit him at the zoo, but her family lived far away and couldn't afford the trips. She wouldn't be able to come often. The zoo's goal was to rehabilitate Koshi and give him a better life, but despite their best efforts, his sadness never lifted. Until the day he saw Mandy. That moment gave Sam, the head zookeeper, real hope. Koshi must have seen something in Mandy that reminded him of the girl from the compound. Even though Mandy was much younger, she carried the same kindness in her heart. Sam begged Andrea and Connor to help Koshi. If they could visit often, maybe it would help the tiger fully recover. The staff only wanted what was best for him. They gave the family a zoo pass and even invited them to come in before official hours so Koshi and Mandy could play together without a crowd. Of course, the glass wall would always remain between them. Even though the girl from the compound had played with him directly, they would never put Mandy at risk. But through the glass, they could still share that special bond. Andrea and Connor brought Mandy to the zoo often. She had so many amazing experiences there. She became such a beloved visitor that the staff eventually let her help with more tasks as she grew. She even got to feed some of the baby animals. But the most important thing? Koshi got better. He wasn't sad anymore. He even began to connect with other tigers. It was a mission accomplished, one that changed a little girl's life forever. Inspired by her love for animals, all those zoo visits, and her bond with Koshi, Mandy grew up to become a veterinarian. And not just anywhere. She worked at the very zoo that helped raise her. She dedicated her life to caring for animals, all because of one tiger who kept bowing to her. What an incredible story. What would you do if a tiger charged at you from behind a glass wall? Thanks for watching. Join us again for even more amazing stories.